April 4th of this year, my phone buzzed. I got this email and it started, "Hey, Ben, are we unloading a bunch? It seems to me that this is going to drag on for a while. So I'd like to divest a fairly large amount. I'm too old to risk what I have, especially with this Yahoo sitting in the Oval Office. Sorry if you're a fan." So that was April 4th of this year. And that's a gut check type of email. And yet it's not new. Over the last 2 decades, I've experienced, well, at least the aftermath of the tech collapse, 9/11, the accounting scandals of the early 2000s, the 2008 financial crisis, bunches of corrections in between, obviously COVID, the 2022 bear market, all the little things in between. And this kind of email is what shows up from time to time when the news cycle and the market cycle sort of collide with someone's life savings. And to set the scene a bit, the S&P 500 had been flirting with record highs earlier in the year, and by April 4th of this year, it had dropped down to, I think it was, don't quote me, I think it was about 5,000. More than a 15% decline in the year, and an intraday 20% plus drop from its peak. And for those of you keeping score at home, that's like a $3 million portfolio. Not like, it is a $3 million portfolio declining more than 600,000 in just about 2 months. That's not funny. It's not abstract. That's real money. Most of the industry, our contemporaries, the default response to a note like this is to actually default the status quo. Reduce risk, raise cash, soothe the nerves. And why? Because it's easier. It's less confrontational. It's a transaction, not a relationship. But that's not my job. It's not my job. My job, as I see it, is to be the only or the one person in my client's life who can see a bit further down the road when their view is sort of blocked by flashing red headlines and fear. My job is to use not necessarily at all my technical knowledge of the markets, but my accumulated experience with hundreds of human beings under stress. My job is to protect their purpose, not just their portfolio. So when I called him back, my first question was rather simple. It was more of a statement, really. I really understand, how frustrating this feels right now. Can we walk through together at some point here your thought process on what moving more of your portfolio to cash will do in terms of supporting the long-term goals that we've set? I talked a bit and then I shut up. Because the point here was not to drown him in data or repeat the tired slogans like stay the course. Those things don't work in the middle of a 20% drawdown any more than vitamin C works sort of after you're already sick. If you haven't been supplementing your immune system ahead of time, you're really not going to fight off that cold. And in the same way, if you haven't been coached again and again on how markets behave and how your portfolio should behave, no statistic will calm you down when your portfolio is hemorrhaging. That's why empathy comes first. Logic can only take root after sort of the fear has been receded. And because we've been supplementing for years, talking about the inevitability of corrections, practicing the mental discipline of ignoring headlines, he did listen. He paused, and ultimately he didn't sell. And this makes me think of this myth, one of the myths I find that the financial advisory industry is built on. That age dictates asset allocation. It's not true. It's never been true. Yet, about 50% or more of all 401k assets actually sit in target date mutual funds, the ultimate one size fits all formula, locking investors into the idea that it's their birthday, not their purpose, that determines their portfolio. As ridiculous as that sounds. But here's what I categorically believe. There's no intrinsic relationship between age and asset allocation. None. A rational long-term allocation for an 83-year-old should be governed by life expectancy, certainly, but by also his children's and grandchildren's. This client situation is sort of a textbook example. He's 100% invested in equities with roughly about 12 or so months of expenses in a high yielding savings account. His portfolio easily covers his income needs. And under these conditions, moving to cash would have actually reduced the longevity of his assets, not increased it. It would have impoverished his heirs so that he could feel safer in the moment. And the irony, his children and grandchildren are one of the favorite topics of conversation. Yet under stress, the focus shifted from purpose to protection at all costs. And that's human, that's normal. But it's also why advisors like us have to do the real job, pull the conversation back to purpose. Most advisors would have defaulted to the status quo in that moment. Think of how easy it would be to say, sure, let's raise some cash. After all, market's down sharply. Who would blame you? But the job of an advisor isn't to validate a moment of panic. It's to stand between that panic and the decision the client will ultimately regret. It's to be the person who's seen this movie before and knows how it ends. So when you default to the status quo in our business, it means you give people what they think they want in the moment rather than what you know that they need over the long haul. It's about choosing comfort over courage. It's letting short-term emotions destroy long-term plans. To default to purpose instead means something tremendously different. It means asking somewhat difficult questions in perhaps softer ways. It means being able to be relentlessly empathetic without enabling. It means reminding people why they built their portfolio in this way in the first place. I have learned over the years, often the hard way, that charts and statistics don't save clients from bad decisions during corrections. Coaching does. Empathy does. Consistency certainly does. Watching a portfolio go down 10, 20, 30 plus percent is gut wrenching. Nobody enjoys it. Nobody thanks you for that in the moment. But if you've built a deep coaching relationship, you can say the quiet but crucial things. This is temporary. Remember, we talked about how recovery is always closer than it actually feels in the moment. We built this plan specifically with these types of things in mind. And then, crucially, you stay silent. You let them process. You let the coaching kick in. And what happened next? Well, he stayed invested. By this time now, I think the S&P 500 from that April 4th level has recovered to more than 30%. 30%. Think about that for a moment. Had he gone to cash, had he locked in a 600,000 plus loss and missed the recovery, instead, his portfolio not only regained its value, but grew well beyond the previous high. It's not luck. That's discipline. That's coaching. So the real mandate. For me, the mandate of an advisor is crystal clear. Use your experience that you have had with countless human beings sometimes under a great amount of stress, financial stress, to guide the one that's in front of you today. Protect their purpose, not just a portfolio. Coach them so incredibly consistently throughout the good times so that your voice can cut through the noise in the bad times. And finally, and maybe most importantly, reject the notion of defaulting to the status quo. This is hard work. It's not glamorous. It's certainly not fun when a client is scared, angry, political. But this is what people are really paying us for. They're not paying us for stock picks or clever allocation shifts or, God help us, alternative investments. They're paying for someone who can keep them from making the one or two catastrophic behavioral mistakes that will blow up their decades of compounding. So if you're reading this as an investor or listening to this as an investor, take a hard look at your own day-to-day decisions. Are you defaulting to the status quo, maybe without even knowing it? Are you letting your age, your political views, or recent headlines dictate or determine your portfolio? And to the rest of us as advisors, ask yourselves, are you simply executing a portfolio of trades and soothing nerves? Are you coaching people to be their best financial selves? Are you willing to risk an uncomfortable conversation today to preserve your client's future, their purpose tomorrow? This isn't about knowing everything or anything. It's about caring enough to stand your ground, knowing that markets recover, but compounding that's lost cannot easily or sometimes at all be regained. So I don't tell this story to attempt to illustrate that I was right or how right I was. I tell it to show how human we all are. Even a well-coached 100% equity investor with plenty of cash reserves can feel the urge to bail. I've been there too. I've made mistakes. I've learned the hard way. Empathy beats logic in every one of these moments. And my role as intellectual, it's to guide, to remind, and sometimes to absorb the anger or fear so that my client doesn't act on it. I don't call that arrogance, I call that service. And back on April 4th, it would have been really easy to give the client what he thought he wanted. Instead, we chose together to stay with the plan that we built, the one that we built when the skies were clear. And because of that choice, his future and certainly his children's, grandchildren's future is stronger today. That's what default to the status quo really means in this business. And that's why I refuse to do it. So go be relentless, everyone. Have a great, great week. Thank you.